Alright, everyone, hello. Welcome to the next episode of our series about operational considerations for blind pilots. Today, I thought I would talk about vatsim specific operational procedures. And by this, I mean things like pushbacks, things like having to reposition, things that you might get told to do, like traffic separation or visual approaches. I'll try and keep this one short. I think it will be shorter than the last one because there's not too much to say. So you filed your flight plan on vatsim. We know we're not going to be taxiing, and there's potential we're not going to be pushing back. What do we do here then? So let's assume you've got a pretty fully staffed airport. You obviously call for clearance, or you use CPDLC, which I'll probably do another video on, because I really recommend using CPDLC. And I don't just mean vatsim controllers sending you a CPDLC through vPilot. You actually are able to use, as you may see, some of these payware aircraft have CPDLC built into them. But for blind pilots, because we don't have that in the PMDG, you can use this external application called Easy CPDLC to request text clearances, which is very cool en route as well, because you don't have to do everything by voice. So I'll probably make that my next episode, but anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. Anyway, so you get your clearance via voice or CPDLC. And when you filed your flight plan, I would recommend always to just pop in the remarks, as we've said, blind pilot will need to reposition to the runway, as we have software limitations. This will only take a second. Thanks for the help. Something like that. You're trying to address the key points in as few words as possible. So, the point is we'll need to reposition. You're pointing out why the software limitations, obviously, and you're a blind pilot. And then I like to put in there that it won't take long, because sometimes controllers have this thing where they think, oh no, they're going to be repositioning forever and I'm going to have to hold up the whole traffic queue. Some controllers, generally vatsim, especially in the busier regions, gets it now, but you're always going to get some newer controllers maybe who don't quite understand what we're asking for, and they get a bit panicky about whether it's going to disrupt the flow, when it's not at all, really. You can just hold the next guy in line, hold him short of the runway, spawn us onto the threshold, and off we go. It gets a bit more complicated if the runway has a bunch of intersections for departure, because then, of course, there might be traffic holding at different points on the runway, but generally, if you're able to work us into the sequence, then it doesn't end up being too bad at all. So put that in your remarks. Hopefully, the controllers are going to read that. In the ideal scenario, the delivery controller will read that when they look at your flight plan, and they will then communicate with the ground and tower controllers, and they'll let them know. That, however, is very wishful thinking. Unfortunately, controllers rarely look at the remarks on the flight plan. Some do. Some of them, it's not their fault. They've got so many pilots to clear. It's fair enough. They can't necessarily read the remarks all the time. Anyway, so you get your clearance, and let's assume you've not heard anything about, the controller saying, hey, I will coordinate. What do you do then? Well, obviously it depends on the airport's procedures. Normally, in many cases in Europe, you'll let the delivery controller know that we are fully ready. They will then send you over to ground, and then it's time to get your push and start. The next question, and this is very sort of user dependent. It kind of depends how you want to go about this. Me personally, from experience on vatsim, I don't like. I mean, I'll be honest. I've tried a lot of different variations of this. From experience, I don't like announcing over frequency this whole thing. I don't want to tune to ground and then say, oh yes, but we're a blind pilot and we need to reposition. Can you communicate with tower and blah blah blah. I just think it clogs up the frequency. Especially on busy events, it's not helpful. I've tried doing it this way sometimes just to get the controller's attention, and I just don't think it really helps. So here's what I would say. If you have a ground and a tower online, for example, Obviously, this is all a lot less complicated if it's just one guy on like center or something. Then you don't really have this whole switching frequencies thing. But let's say you have contacted ground, or you switched over to ground. I would not even tell ground that you're a blind pilot at this point. They don't need to know that. It's kind of irrelevant. All I would do is at this point drop the tower controller a private message and pretty much just paste in your remarks. You can even just have a text file where you just say, again, hi, I just wanted to let you know I'm a blind pilot. I will need to reposition to the runway when my time comes in the queue. I'm just on stand right now and getting ready, but I will let you know when we are ready to go. The reason I wouldn't tell ground this is they don't really need to know, ultimately. Ground doesn't have any jurisdiction to allow you to reposition to the runway anyway. You're not going to be taxiing, so you don't need to tell ground that you're a blind pilot. The only thing ground needs to know from you is when you are ready for either engine start or push and start. And this is the next thing. And the reason I would drop tower that message early is because tower is often quite busy and it often takes them a little bit to get back to you. So if you send this message after you've started it up and you're ready, you're going to be sat there for maybe 5 or 10 minutes just waiting for them to get back to you. So I would drop it just as you're getting ready to push and start, just letting them know, hey, we're just starting up right now. I'll let you know when we're ready, but we're going to need to reposition to the runway. Then they know, and they can start creating a gap for you in the sequence. And if for some unfortunate reason they get back to you and say, we can't do this, you have some time to reason with them. You can message them back and say, listen, look, we're a blind pilot, we do this all the time. And of course, if they really aren't playing ball, you can call a supervisor. But the last thing you want is to have a conversation with them after you've already started up and you just sat there with your engines running. It just doesn't make sense. So get your message into them early. Once you've got your clearance, just drop them a message. And as I said, some controllers will be good and they will have read the remarks and they might say, we were already aware of this. Well, no harm in sending a message, right? If they say, we know about this, don't worry. Perfect. Amazing. Same with even if it's a center, I will always generally get my clearance from them and then drop them a private message with the information if they haven't said anything. If they say by voice, and I've copied your remarks, amazing. I know you've got me. I know that I'm a blind pilot and what the situation is. If you don't say that, I'm going to drop you a PM, right? So whoever it is, I would always do this. But let's carry on with our scenario where we've got the whole shebang online, ground and tower and whatever. So you've sent tower your message. Now it's time to tell ground that you are ready for either engine start or push and start. Pushback for blind pilots can be tricky, right? If you're using P3D, you can use GSX. And GSX is better than the default PMDG pushback at determining from the AFCAD and the scenery some default options, nose left, nose right, but it will generally do a slightly better job. PMDG will always just sort of push you, 90 degrees left, 90 degrees right. You can change it, but it's just predefined values. GSX at least will try and scan the scenery, and if you have a payware airport in P3D, you can actually get a profile for GSX, these GSX profiles that are made, and then this will often have custom pushback options. It will tell you push east onto taxiway Lima or whatever in the menu, and you can choose these and you know that they're going to be accurate. All of this is fine, but it really depends on the airport you're at, and especially on vatsim it gets trickier, right? If you're offline, you can just do a pushback, and if you get pushed back onto the grass, it doesn't really matter. On vatsim, what I've noticed is a lot of airports, the general direction that they're going is moving away from just saying push southeast, push west, whatever, just giving you a cardinal direction. Some airports, like in the UK, they still do this quite a bit. But if you fly in places like Germany, they will often do this thing now where they'll say, push back to the blue line or push back to the red line or whatever. And these are lines depicted on the chart. And really, to do that, you have to use GSX. Now, GSX in Microsoft Flight Simulator is a lot more of a pain. I can't say I recommend purchasing it. There are some brave souls who have managed to sort of use it with golden cursor. For me, it's just too much of a pain. I'm not going to pay for that. You have to click some things on it every flight in the toolbar. Yeah, not great. Not for me. No, thank you. I'm just fine. So, that's it's kind of up to you. But either way, if you get told something like this, push onto the blue line, or even push onto taxiway alpha or something like that. Sometimes you'll get that, push east onto taxiway alpha. Well, that's great, but to do that, I'm going to have to create a custom pushback. GSX has this custom pushback mode where you can go in, you can visually tell it on a diagram of the airport where you want to be pushed to. We can't do that. So you're either going to be relying on sort of default pushback options, or you just don't push back at all. Now, if it's a busy vatsim event, I will be totally honest, my preference is just not to push back. Unless I know that they are going to give me, or I'm listening in on frequency and I can hear them giving pilots just very simple directions like push north, push south, something like that. That's fine. If I'm hearing them say push onto this taxiway, it's a lot trickier, and I just don't think it's really doable. You also have the issue that they're often going to say things like, after the aircraft behind you, push onto this taxiway, or behind the blah 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 aircraft, push. Again, we can't really do that. You can use TFM's ground radar to try and see where the aircraft is, but unless they're using the exact same scenery as you, it's not going to label where they are. So just a lot of issues. So if the airport is quiet, there's not much going on, you can just push back. Of course, if you're on Unicom. There was someone in the comments of a previous video talking about how they were using charts with ChatGPT to get some direction on which way to push based on where they needed to go, and that's really impressive. I haven't even done that myself. You could definitely try that. AI is getting so advanced. I would not be surprised. So when it's quiet, you can do this kind of thing. But I always say, when it's busy, often the thing is just don't bother pushing back. You're not going to be taxiing anyway. Does it really matter if you start your engines at the stand? So often I will just call ground and say requesting startup negative pushback, something like that. And the other thing to consider is, of course, some airports you don't need to request pushback. There is this misconception that in the US you don't need to request a push. That is very generalized and is not correct. Airports have specific procedures, and it depends if you're pushing into what they call a non-movement area. If you're pushing into a non-movement area, then you do need to request push. So don't just assume I'm in the US, I don't need to request it. It's airport specific too, which is obviously something that, again, can be quite difficult to tell. Sometimes the easiest way is just to go by what everybody else is doing. If all the other guys are requesting push in this airport, then, well, I probably need to request it too. So the best advice I can give with pushback is use your own judgment. Have a listen into the frequency and see what people are being given. If it sounds like an instruction you can follow, like it's just, okay, face a certain direction, we can probably do that with whatever you're using, PMDG or GSX. If they're giving more complex instructions and you can tell there's a lot of airplanes around, I would just say forget it. Just start your engines on the stand. You're going to be repositioning anyway. Doesn't really make any difference. So for us, and the other thing is, if you get your pushback wrong, you could block a taxiway, right? And then you've got to sit and wait for reposition. You're not going to be moving. You'll just be sat there waiting to reposition. You might be blocking somebody else. So that's another thing to consider. Anyway, so that's really all ground can do for us is the engine start and then push. So at this point, hopefully Tower has responded to your message and they have said, yeah, sure, okay, let me know and I'll work you in. At this point, depending on how busy it is, if it's not busy, I'll often let ground know. You can say, as we're a blind pilot, we're coordinating with Tower, so I'm going to switch over to Tower if that's all right. Thanks for the help. Something like that. But if it's a really busy event, again, ground don't really need to know. It's not their jurisdiction to allow you to reposition to the runway. This is, when you're trying to coordinate the reposition, there's no need to tell every controller at the airport that you're going to reposition. The only guy or person, I should say, I'm going to get cancelled probably in today's day and age. The only person who is going to be having any impact on whether you are, or when, you shouldn't even be whether, because they should be really allowing you to do it, but when you're going to be repositioning is the tower controller for the runway you're going to be using. So they're really the only person who needs to coordinate that. So if it's busy after you've started your engines, just switch to tower. Just go straight to tower and just say, as I would normally do, okay, Vision 2 Delta Whiskey, hello, we're just holding position here at stand 1. We have started and we're fully ready, so just let us know when you want us to reposition. That's all you got to say, right? When you get a gap on frequency. Then the tower knows you're on their frequency, and they know that they need to tell you, and then they'll come back to you on frequency. Then you've transitioned from private message to frequency, and they'll say, okay, yeah, and then hopefully they'll let you know and you reposition to the runway. That's how I would recommend it goes, pretty much, basically. So again, to recap, you get your clearance, you switch to ground when you're told, you request push and start, or push, depending on push and start, or just start, depending on what you kind of judge to be the best thing to do. Okay, and then whilst you're doing that, whilst you're starting up or just before, you drop tower a private message, and then you go from there and you coordinate with tower. And from there, everything is pretty smooth. In terms of repositioning, I would recommend to use FS Tramp still. The release version of TFM, the free version that is on the website, does not do a great job at lining you up on the center line because of some data limitations. FS Tramp has its own independent and external scenery generator, and I've found that it always lines you up on the correct runway heading if you compare it with published data sources online for what the runway heading should be. TFM will put you on the runway, but it might put you a little bit off. There will hopefully be upgrades to this, and this is already ongoing with the new TFM that will be coming out. But I would say if you can, get FS Tramp. You don't need to have a license to reposition. You just need to have FS Tramp installed. You just need to have run the scenery assembler, and then you can use it. You just go up to the Find tab at the top with the screen review, and then you go to the Find box, type in the airport code, hit tab. Or type in the airport code, hit enter to search, and then hit tab, and you'll land in a list of all the runways. So that's what I would do. Tramp is also very quick at repositioning the aircraft, so it doesn't pause the sim or anything, it just repositions it. You hit context menu key on the airport location you want to spawn to, whether it's a runway or a gate, and then you go down to skip to here, and you hit enter, and then you hit execute, and it will skip you to the runway. So that's, just a side note. I personally use Tramp. I think it's the most accurate for repositioning to runways. And just remember as well, you are always going to be repositioning to the runway threshold. Sometimes controllers, when you are coordinating with the tower, they will try and get you to go to an intersection. They might say, can you reposition to holding point Mike 1 or whatever? No. You can't do it. Unfortunately, it would be very nice if we could reposition to the holding points or the intersections to have an intersection departure, but the software we use doesn't currently allow for it. So you have to spawn to the threshold. You are then doing a full length. So sometimes you then have to say to the controller, negative, it will be the runway threshold. And I would put that in your initial message to them. When you say we're going to reposition, say runway threshold, so that they know it's not going to be like an intersection. So that's another side note. Anyway, and then of course, that's pretty much the departure done. You'll fly out of there, and that'll be that. So, and it's the same procedure. Like I said, if you got an approach or a center on and it's top-down coverage, same procedure. Get your clearance, drop them a message, do the engine start or engine start and pushback, and then reposition. What other things might be impacting you on vatsim then? Of course, one of them might be traffic. They will often say to you, oh yes, traffic 12 o'clock 4 miles, blah blah, report in sight. this is generally something that happens, say, on approach. The US like to do it quite a lot because they will often then say follow the traffic visual approach. But either way, it can also be if they think there's a conflict, a potential traffic conflict. But either way, can we do this? Well, kind of. You can use TFM's airborne traffic radar to locate the aircraft. Although we have been having some issues with that in the most recent sim build. Not sure if it's an FSUI PC problem, but so you can kind of see the aircraft. But I would let the controller know, because normally they're just going to let you know these things for your own informational purposes. It doesn't mean you're going to crash into them. It's just sort of letting you know. You can often say, yeah, Roger, thanks for the info. We don't have him inside as we're a blind pilot, but we'll keep an eye on the TCAS. Essentially, TFM is, what it has is a TCAS. So it just doesn't alert you, but you can see other aircraft. So you can kind of do that, but you cannot maintain visual separation. So just be careful of that. The other thing is visual approaches as well. They love to do these in the US, as you'll probably know. Be aware if you're looking at the ATIS and it says visual approaches that they are probably going to try and give it to you. This is why flying for the virtual airline that we have, Vision or BVI Virtual, is quite good, because a lot of the time they will recognize us. I'll say, it's a Vision, and I should, this is often the case for reposition too. If you're flying for Vision, especially like a lot of the airports we commonly go to, the big airports, maybe like Heathrow, Frankfurt, JFK, whatever, they will just see Vision and they will know. And this is kind of my goal, that, as Vision continues to grow, we've been going for years, but as we continue to grow, more controllers will just see Vision and they'll know, BVI, it's a blind pilot, okay. And they'll just instantly know our procedures. But so, let's assume that they don't know that and they have just, potentially you've contacted approach and they've just cleared you for a visual. It's really important you speak up straight away and say, negative, we're a blind pilot, we need the ILS. Also be aware, sometimes you will have multiple sectors on approach. You might have several approach controllers and they might not necessarily, I've even had it, they don't always communicate, where you will tell one of them and then you'll go to the next one and they'll suddenly at the last minute say, can you accept the visual? Again, you have to be like, no. You've got to make sure you tell them pretty early on. Otherwise, you might end up being set up on a heading to then go and fly a visual, and that's obviously not what you want. So that's pretty much it. Then in terms of landing, I would also say when you are with the tower controller for landing and they clear you to land, let them know what you're going to do. So either as a blind pilot, you're going to disconnect on the rollout, or you're going to spawn over to a stand. I would just let them know of that. Just let them know, hey, as we're a blind pilot, we'll disconnect after we finish the rollout. Just so they know. Because you got to think, it looks slightly odd to them and other pilots what a blind pilot is doing. Normally, when you are a sighted pilot, of course, you're planning to vacate the runway at a certain intersection point. So you will slow, not to a stop, you will just slow quite a bit, maybe, 20, 30 knots, and then you will vacate the runway. What we are doing is stopping the plane on the runway, pretty much, right? We bring it to a stop. To controllers and pilots, that looks a bit strange. They're like, what the hell is this guy doing? Why is he stopped on the runway? And it can lead to them sending the person around you around on a missed approach, because they think, this guy's on the runway. You want to let them know just briefly what you're going to do. Either I'm going to disconnect, or hey, I'm going to reposition over to a stand as we were unable to taxi. That way they know that even if you come to a stop on the runway, you're going to be off the runway very shortly and they can still clear the person behind you to land. So I would let them know of that too. And sometimes controllers are really friendly. They'll say, you can reposition to stand, 10. That's fine. And they'll even give you a stand. And then that's great because you can stop on the runway, boot up Tramp or even TFM. I would honestly, TFM for gates is fine. I would just not use it for runways, because when you're repositioning to a runway, it's very important that you're bang on the center line. You don't want to be skewed off. But if it's a gate, well, it's not so important really. You're just sort of parking the plane up. You can just pretend the pilot was drunk and sort of parked it a bit skew if, doesn't matter. But Yeah, you can pull up TFM's gates and you can find the stand 10 or whatever, and you can just hit enter and spawn over there. So, it depends. If it's a busy event, sometimes they'll just be like, Roger, and that's it. They don't give a shit. As far as they're concerned, as long as you get off the runway and you disconnect, and you don't just sit there like a lemon on the runway, they don't care. And again, I keep coming back, but it's very important when you reposition for departure as well, that you are fully ready. When you tell them you're ready to reposition, be ready, right? You've got to have everything done. Don't, I'm just going to reposition and then I just have to set my flaps and do my before takeoff and then I just have to go and check my FMC and blah, blah. No. You need to be ready, right? Because they've got a place for you in the sequence. So don't, a pilot in the real world would not taxi and then enter the runway and be unprepared. So just because you are repositioning, also be prepared, and sometimes you will get this. Sometimes you'll get immediate takeoff. It is a valid piece of phraseology, cleared for immediate takeoff. That means, literally go. So this can happen. The other thing, and I just thought of this as well, is if you have an airport with multiple runways active for departure, say something like Frankfurt, and you are cleared on a certain runway, don't be too surprised if the tower controller, when you are speaking to them about the reposition, asks you if you can use a different runway. It's even something I've proposed before. If the tower controller seems hesitant, they say, we'll try and get you in. I will often say, yeah, that's fine. If you need me to use a different runway, you let me know. Right? As long as they let you know, be prepared to reprogram your FMC and go on a different runway. Because if an airport has 3 active runways, for example, and there is a runway that is less busy, even if it's like a shorter runway maybe, and you're a bit heavy, but you can still make it if you just, redo your performance calculations, then do it, because it will allow you to get out quicker and it'll ease the controller's workload. So yeah, don't be surprised and don't get irritated if the tower controller, when you coordinate with them, changes your runway. Because remember, the delivery controller might not know that you're a blind pilot, and they might just clear you on the runway that everyone else is using, but then tower might say, actually, yeah, if you've got to reposition, it's kind of easier for me if I just put you on this other runway. I'm all for that. I think where you will have issues as a blind pilot repositioning are the airports where there is one runway and a lot of traffic, because that runway is being used for arrivals and departures. They got people lined up. That can take a while. You got to remember the pilots on vatsim who are sighted are probably just lined up in a queue waiting at the runway. You're in the queue. This is how it should be. You are in the queue. You're just holding at the gate, but they've got to get some people moved out before they can spawn you in. So onto the runway. So, but if there's multiple runways, then they can afford to say, yes, let's put you on the runway that is least busy right now, and then you'll be able to go quicker. So that's something to expect. So yeah, I don't think I have anything else to really say about vatsim. A lot of it can be your judgment, but it's all about being really clear in how you communicate. Like I said, I don't think it's a good idea to start blabbing on frequency about how you're a blind pilot and need to reposition and blah blah blah. It's fine if it's brief. So like on the landing clearance, you're kind of in the middle of landing the aircraft. You don't really want to be private messaging the tower about landing. So as long as you keep it brief, it's just, we'll disconnect on the rollout as we're a blind pilot, sure. But with the departure, often to reposition to a runway, it's a more complicated thing because the controller's got to work you in. And then you have to often have a back and forth and a kind of a negotiate sometimes with some tower controllers. They don't understand, or they say, but we're busy right now. Occasionally you have to have a bit of a back and forth, and you don't really want to have that on frequency, right? It just doesn't look good, doesn't sound good, whatever. So there you go. And again, top tip, if you fly with the Vision call sign, or preferably you join Vision. I would prefer you didn't fly with that call sign when you are not actually a Vision pilot, but I can't stop you. Then a lot of controllers do know who we are, so then you will have less explaining to do. So that's kind of nice. Anyway, this video probably was just about as long as the last one, so I kept thinking of new things to say, but there you go. So I hope this was useful. Again, this is just my approach. Other people might have slightly different approaches to how they do things on vatsim as a blind pilot, but for having tried various things from letting controllers know on frequencies to private message to flight plan remarks, I think private messaging is the best thing, and I think putting it in your remarks is important. But just remember, they don't always read it. The brutal reality is they don't, often look at the remarks. Because SimBrief often puts a lot of junk in the remarks. There's a whole load of other pretty superfluous information that SimBrief adds in about your aircraft type and equipment and blah, 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 which is, probably real world, but also kind of annoying because then the controllers just skip past your remarks. So, it's something to consider that they may not have read the remarks and maybe I need to do it a different way. All right, I hope this was useful. The next videos, I think I will try and cover PDC, how to do that as a blind pilot. And then maybe we'll also do some other episodes too. So, all right, bye-bye.